With his knotted hair, black-rimmed eyes, and voice that sounds like it came from a bad dream, Robert Smith is unlike anyone else in rock music history. But Robert is more than just the lead singer of The Cure. He is the spirit of a whole age that has died. Songs like Boys Don't Cry, Lovesong, and Disintegration have become the background music for people whose minds never felt at home in this busy world. The Cure has sold more than 30 million albums around the world, and their 40th anniversary show in Hyde Park in 2018 brought 65,000 people to tears. However, Robert Smith chooses to live a quiet life, free of scandal, without children, and without noise, even though everyone calls him the Goth King and the founder of post-punk and alternative rock. He acts like fame was never his goal. One artist was kicked out of high school for having too much influence, got into fights behind the scenes during a European tour, and was once thought to be racist because of the name of a song. He has been with his first love for more than 50 years, though. He never left The Cure, even when other people did, and he's almost 70 years old and still stands on stage. It's a sad song, deep, hazy, quiet, and beautiful in a way that no spotlight can show. That's Robert Smith's life. What turned a kid who was bullied for being different into a cultural icon around the world? What's really going on behind that smudged lipstick, wild hair, and dreamy look? Watch this movie to find out. Early life. As a boy, Robert Smith never really lived in one place. He was born in Blackpool in 1959. His family constantly moved from Blackpool to Horley until they finally settled in Crawley, West Sussex. This was the first place where The Cure was first used. Robert grew up in a quiet family home in southern England with long hallways and rainy nights. He liked to hide in his room and spin records, putting himself away from the world with music. There was no such thing as a poor family in his family. Alex Smith, his father, had been in the Navy and had a strong, warm voice. He often sang to his kids at night, and Robert learned the first tunes from him without even realizing it. Rita, his mother, played the piano and thought that music was the only thing that could help her kids find their way in a world that was becoming less interesting. For as long as it made their kids happy, neither parent made them do anything. They just told them to play and sing. Robert was the third child of 4. His sister Janet, who was called the piano prodigy because she learned music from a young age with their mother, was the star of the family. In fact, Janet pushed Robert in a different way by accident. In order to stand out and have his own voice, he picked up the guitar. I had to go in a different direction because my sister was too good. And I picked the guitar because it can scream without saying a word. Robert often fought against strict rules when he was in school. In the 1970s, wearing a black silk skirt to school was seen as bad behavior, so he was hit after class. Teachers said he was just being rebellious, but his friends made fun of him and thought he should be punished. Robert hasn't changed because of those things. They only made him go deeper into himself, guarded himself more, and turned music into his only safe place. While Robert was a student at St. Wilfrid's Comprehensive in 1976, he played with his band Malice, which was the forerunner of The Cure, at the school's Christmas event. No one thought the show would do as well as it did. However, the administration said he was a problem for other students and chose to suspend him. The place where he was meant to learn how to be true to himself kicked him out. Robert didn't give up, though. He sat down and wrote his first songs. Not by sight, but by ear. I write when I'm by myself. Robert Smith didn't have a tragic childhood in the usual sense, but the way people treated him as an odd child and the fact that his family didn't say anything about it made him the perfect outsider. He was strong enough to turn his darkness into music that people all over the world could relate to in his early career. After being kicked out of school in 1976 for playing with the band Malice, Robert Smith never went back to school. He picked music not because it was the easy way out, but because it was the only way out that was still available. Robert formed Easy Cure with childhood friends Lol Tolhurst, Michael Dempsey, and Porel Thompson. They were a rock band that mixed cold tones, experimental textures, and ideas from post-punk and French philosophy. Later, the name was shortened to The Cure, which is a simple word with a lot of meaning. Music can help you feel better when you're sad, lonely, or lost. The Cure signed with Fiction Records in 1978. Robert, who was only 19, was the band's creative head, lead singer, and person who chose how they looked. Killing an Arab, The Cure's first song, caused a lot of trouble right away. The song was a philosophical allegory for how pointless and ridiculous violence is. It was based on Albert Camus' book The Stranger. But its title was easy to get wrong. Robert Smith had to say over and over that the song was never meant to be racist for years. I would have given it a different name if I knew that was how it would be taken. But sometimes the things that are most honest are also the ones that are most changed. Three Imaginary Boys, their first record, released in 1979, was a mix of different feelings, from boredom and sarcasm to emptiness, all of which were shown through Robert's distant voice and signature icy guitar playing. That was just the start. Robert took the Cure deeper into the shadows of the human soul with 17 Seconds, 1980, Faith, 1981, and then Pornography, 1982. There, sadness didn't need a reason, and death and meaninglessness seemed like natural parts of life. Porn was more than just an album, it was a nightmare that was taped. As the meetings went on, Robert became more and more hopeless. He later stated that the band was on the verge of greatness and disaster, with members drinking, using drugs, and getting more and more angry inside. The tour in 1982 finished with a punch. Robert Smith and Simon Gallup fought behind the scenes in Strasbourg, which caused the band to break up for a short time. Their friendship was over because of fights and long nights. After only 3 records, it looked like the Cure were done. In spite of everything, Robert didn't give up on singing. He played guitar for Susie and the Banshees and then joined forces with Stephen Severin to make the side project The Glove. These side trips not only helped him get his mind back on track, but they also made him more creative, which would later help the Cure leave their shadow. And by the time he joined the Cure again in 1983, Robert wasn't just a lonely, worn-out, but clear-headed musician. He was an artist who had lived through the songs he wrote. He was about to write the best parts of his career from that wreckage. Career breakthrough. When Robert Smith returned to the Cure in 1984, the band was still in pieces from previous fights. Folks from the band and friends had left. The group's picture was broken up. But he didn't go back, instead, he went forward and put together all the broken pieces to make a new Cure. It was stronger, more passionate, and big enough to hold all the pain he had never spoken out loud. In 1985, The Head on the Door was the first sign of things to change. Even though it was still dark, Robert's music sounded beautiful for the first time. The sad words and happy melody of the song In Between Days paved a new way, making pain into something you could dance to. The band started getting interest from people in the US, went on tours around the world, and climbed the charts beyond the Gothic underground scene. But Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. 1987, a bold, sprawling double record full of different styles, was the real masterpiece. Robert made a musical feast that was as crazy as he was feeling. There was funk, ballad, shrieking guitars, and whispery singing. The record became a huge hit and put the Cure on the map around the world. A song about love and loss called Just Like Heaven became a famous hit. It had a magical sound that made you feel like you were falling apart and flying at the same time. That was just the start of a great work. Robert released the album Disintegration in 1989. He wrote it when he was 29 years old and felt like time was pushing him to the edge. He once said, "I thought I was going to die at 30, so I wrote this album as a farewell." Disintegration wasn't just a bunch of songs, it was a trip. Pictures of You is about how lonely it is, Plainsong is about how hopeless things seem, and Lovesong is about how much love hurts. The record got a lot of attention on Billboard and sold more than 3 million copies. It is still one of the most complete statements in popular music about love, death, and losing one's ego. Robert Smith and The Cure were at the top of their game from 1989 to 1992. The Prayer Tour sold out all over the world, and Robert's picture became a figure in popular culture. She has been on MTV and Rolling Stone and is known as the face of Gothic rock by people of all ages. Strangely, though, Robert pulled away more as he became more famous. He didn't buy fancy homes, try to be famous, or make the Cure into a brand that could be sold. In the early 1990s, rock music was becoming more and more commercialized, but Robert Smith stuck to one concept. He only composed music when he had something important to say. Because of this, his work always touched people deeply. Personal life. Robert Smith has always been an exception in the rock world, which is known for chaos, short-lived relationships, scandals, and parties that never stop. He always made it clear that he was a man of one woman. Robert has known Mary Poole since 1972, when he was 13 years old and they met at St. Wilfrid's School in Crawley. They didn't fall in love right away. At first, they were just friends, and as they grew up, they kept finding each other. Robert's band's lineup changed all the time, and he was banned and hit for wearing a velvet skirt. Mary stayed, quietly, without saying anything, without leaving. In 1976, the same year that The Cure was formed, they became a couple. They were together for more than 10 years before getting married in 1988. They never had kids, not because they couldn't, but because they didn't want to. Robert once said, "I can't imagine having a child in this world while I'm still figuring out how to live in it." He decided to love Mary with everything he wrote instead. Lovesong, the most beautiful love song by The Cure, was written just for her. A promise that will never be broken made during those endless trips. There were no cheating scandals, failed marriages due to fame, or bad feelings after drinking too much. Just a man who always came home to the girl who sat and watched him play guitar when he was 15. Even so, love didn't make things better for Robert Smith. He has dealt with depressions that don't have names, worry, insomnia, and the feeling of being an outsider among other outsiders. He was almost never seen by the public at times. He only showed up in studios or on stage, where he could scream without anyone asking him why. Robert didn't like being talked about. He stood there only because the music made him. What he loved most was always hidden from view. Mary, a quiet room, and a cup of tea late at night. Drafts that aren't quite done. What a trip The Cure is. Mary is the only thing that has always stayed the same. It's possible that Robert Smith never drowned in his own storms because he always had someone, not a place, to go back to. There is disagreement, chaos, and conflict. One of the few bands that has been around for almost 50 years without any drug, arrest, or sex problems is The Cure. That doesn't mean Robert Smith's trip was easy, though. Some people didn't understand him or make the right decision because he didn't say anything or explain himself in public. The first fight came from inside the band, which was the closest place. During the Pornography tour in 1982, Robert Smith and bassist Simon Gallup got so angry with each other that they started fighting backstage in Strasbourg. The fight wasn't just over the setlist or the volume of the music. After months of mental stress, tight schedules, and the clash of two creative, strong minds, it all came together. The fix almost didn't work. Robert left the band for a short time, and they didn't play for a year. Lowell Tolhurst, another old friend, caused the second break. Robert's childhood friend who helped start the band and used to play keyboards and drums. After the collapse, Robert had to make the hard choice to fire Tolhurst because his alcoholism was getting worse and hurting their job and the environment where they worked. It was a very painful choice. Robert knew better than anyone how painful it was to lose someone who had been there for him since they were a child. But he had to decide whether to stay true to the past or help the band stay alive. Some accidents did not happen from the inside. Robert Smith was given a name he didn't want from their very first song, Killing an Arab, in 1978. The song was an intellectual allegory about how pointless life is, based on Albert Camus' book The Stranger. But because of its politically sensitive title, it was quickly seen as racist. Even worse, radical groups used the wrong quote from it. Robert was constantly criticized, and he had to make official comments denying any ties to hate groups. Later releases included disclaimers that explained where the song's ideas came from in literature. "I would have given it a different title if I had known." He soon said, "I never meant for my music to hurt anyone." It was an apology for something he had done wrong. Even after all these years, Robert is still a controversial figure among some reviewers. Some people say he's weird to get attention, saying that the black clothes, messy lipstick, and wild hair were just ways to market himself, but they forget. Robert Smith looked like that when he was 16, before he had any jobs, shows, or fame. It wasn't a plan, it was just how he was. In his recent autobiography, Blink-182, Mark Hoppus made fun of the time when Robert Smith tried to kiss me at a party after their 2004 Wembley show. This led to one of the most recent mistakes. Even though the story was told in a friendly way, it still caused a stir in the news. Robert didn't answer. He may have gotten used to hearing people talk about him without really getting to know them. Robert Smith has been in the middle of fights for more than 40 years. It's not that he wants to be, but because he's an artist who won't bend to please the crowd. He'd rather have a fight with his best friend, lose a record deal, or be misread than change who he is. And maybe that's why he's still here, under the stage lights, with his guitar and songs that have always made people feel scared. Legacy and influence. Robert Smith didn't create Gothic rock, but he made it famous. Robert changed the way music could sound by using smudged lipstick, a distant gaze, and sad melodies. The music didn't have to scream to be powerful, or be dark to feel cold. Even though he never said he was part of a movement, a whole generation of teens dressed in black wrote diaries with lines from Destruction and saw The Cure as the only friend who really understood them. Gothic rock isn't the only thing that Robert Smith has influenced. He set an example for artists who weren't afraid to be honest about their feelings and didn't try to look cool or rebellious in order to get attention. Bands and artists such as Nine Inch Nails, Trent Reznor, Billy Corgan, Smashing Pumpkins, Placebo, Interpol, and even Billie Eilish say that Robert's music and spirit have influenced them a lot. Robert also changed the way artists write songs so that they see them not as a product to be eaten but as a way to heal themselves. He said that music shouldn't be sold. Music is what keeps me from going away. The Cure was admitted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2019. When a reporter asked Robert if he was excited, he said, "Not as much as you do," with a straight face. The answer, biting and honest, quickly went viral because it was so true to Robert. There was no acting, performing, or putting on a show. Robert Smith became a hero in pop culture, even in the way he looked. During the 1980s and 1990s, his face was on t-shirts, signs, tattoos, and magazine covers. People in the fashion world used to make fun of the way he looked, but now his style is admired as a sign of nonconformity and rebellion through silence. Not only have tens of millions of records been sold, but his music has also helped people who thought they were alone stay alive. Picture of You, the same deep water in Lullaby. People saw themselves in you, along with their memories that they didn't name and their unsolved questions. When people sing along with him at these Twilight shows, it doesn't matter what style, genre, or trend he's following. They sing because the songs brought them together when things were bad. So it's not enough to just call Robert Smith a singer. He writes lyrics for people who can't speak for themselves. He's live proof that you can be different and still be loved. To remember you that you can still make the world a better place even if you are sad. Today's life. Robert Smith is 65 years old now. His hair is graying and getting thinner, but he doesn't care about that. It used to be all over the place. Something quiet that reminds him that he never gave up on being himself. He still wears scuffed shoes and lines his eyes with black, but his look has changed. He isn't as angry or rebellious as he used to be. Instead, he is quietly observing, as if he has seen, heard, and understood enough. The Cure came back in 2024 with Songs of a Lost World, their first album in more than 16 years. It was a new musical trip still full of longing, loneliness, and unanswered questions. The record got good reviews. Fans were thrilled about it, not because it went viral, but because it was real. In a time when most fame is based on algorithms and carefully chosen pictures, Robert's music still sounds like a journal that was written by hand with smudged ink. Never polished to show off. Robert once said that he might stop making music in 2029, which is the 50th anniversary of The Cure's first record. But that goodbye won't be loud if it ever comes. There was no big farewell tour or interesting news release. It might just be a small stage with some old songs playing in the background as the lights go out. When he's not making music, you hardly notice him. There will be no social media, reality shows, or nostalgic podcasts. In a big old house in Sussex, he lives with his wife Mary, the only woman he's ever loved in public. They take care of their yard and cats, and Robert still writes sometimes. Not to get away, but to keep the parts of himself he has never let go of. Robert Smith is a hero to many. He may not have tried to be anything at all to himself. He's just a man, lonely, honest, quiet, and loyal, who decided to show his pain through music instead of words. He saved a lot of money by doing that. Some artists don't make music that lasts forever. Robert Smith did it not because of a plan but because he was honest. And maybe he doesn't need to say goodbye after all this. Because Robert is still in the notes every time someone plays Lovesong, Disintegration, or A Forest. In the dark, in people who used to feel like they didn't fit anywhere. For nearly 50 years, Robert Smith stayed true to himself in a world that never stopped yelling. His songs made history, but he will always be remembered as an icon. He was quiet, steady, gentle, and deep. He turned loneliness into art and made the dark a safe place for millions of lost souls. He was great without making a lot of noise. Robert Smith doesn't just leave behind music, he also leaves behind kindness, loyalty, and proof that you can be yourself and still be loved. So, what do you think of Robert Smith's journey? Which of his songs do you remember best? In the comments below, please share your music memory. Each one is an important part of this story. If you don't want to miss the next trip, make sure you like, subscribe, and ring the bell. We'll be telling real stories about real people who lived, who hurt, and who left behind something unforgettable. Thanks for seeing it.